Welcome back to the podcast. Gabe, Giannis, and I, we are joined by Chris Hinshaw. Man, today is a special episode. If it's your first time listening to the podcast, man, get fired up. If you've been listening for a long time, you're going to really enjoy this one. Chris Hinshaw was the first track coach I ever had. He spent a lot of time with me. We got to know each other really, really well. He really made an impact on myself in terms of my fitness and being able to get back on the podium at the CrossFit Games. He has a former Ironman background. He's been doing, he did sales before that. He's just lived a life that is full and fulfilling. And today we talk a lot about breathing mechanics. We talk about some old school stories. We talk about Hyrox. And man, Gabe, I don't know how this could have gone any better. And I'm fired up to have him back on the show.
You listen to this episode and you might shed some tears in the beginning. Yeah. You might get a little emotional in the beginning. And then by the end of the episode, you might sign up for a Hyrox race. That's like the breadth of the topics that we covered. You're going to get hit in the feels in the beginning. And by the end, you're going to be like, I should do a Hyrox race. So dude, it was awesome. I joked about this, but I always love getting some free coaching. So I asked some questions to a guy that knows so much about, running strategy with the Hyrox race that we signed up for and zone 2 and all that good stuff. So I really enjoyed this, man. And I know people will as well.
Yeah, we say we enjoy all the episodes, and we truly do, because this is one of the best things that I do as part of like a quote, my day, my job, you name it. It's just having great conversations with great people and learning new things. And so when we say we really enjoy it, we really do. If we didn't, we just wouldn't do it anymore. But speaking of which, if you enjoy it, share it. That's really how this podcast grows. The way that we make an impact on more people, which is really important to Gabe and I, is to share these episodes with more people. And so if you enjoy this episode, Chris Hinshaw, which we know you will, just like we did, just share with a friend. That's all we ask. Without any further ado, Gabe, let's dive into a great episode with Chris Hinshaw. Let's go.
Let's do it.
Yeah, no, remember that podcast we did in Miami, Chris? And then you told the story, because I think it was like, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it like fresh on your mind? Like, hadn't it just happened like recently before that? Or am I wrong about, it was like was it your nephew? Was that what it was? Or your son?
Yeah, it was my nephew, my daughter, my nephew and my daughter. And then there was a third person, a young girl that was also trapped out there. And it was really fresh on my mind. And I was still kind of, I don't know how it came up, because it certainly isn't something I talk about, but I was still rattled by it. Like, it really affected me.
Yeah. The reason why I wanted to bring this up is because, so years ago, first off, like we said in the intro, Chris, you and I have known each other for years and years and years. And yes, we were doing a podcast, and we've done multiple before, but we were doing a podcast and you brought this up, and it's just something that really resonated with me, because you talked about how, your nephew and others were struggling in the water. You went out there and you basically helped them, and you're a very proficient swimmer, but yet you were just physically exhausted. And Gabe and I were actually just having a conversation about this on the podcast, him and I, about, just basically what it means and how powerful the water is. And if you're uncomfortable, how big of a deal it is, but just to make sure you have the fitness, because you never know when you might need it. And the skill set, because Gabe been swimming throughout the years. So he's very comfortable in the water as well.
Yeah. So this was one where in Hawaii, we were all out there. It was a friendly family break. And all of a sudden, and every now and then on this beach, it gets big, but it just takes time. And this happened in 30 minutes. It was almost like it was, maybe a 2-foot wave to a 15-foot wave in 30 minutes. And at first it was kind of fun. Like, wow, this is awesome. Playful. And, being a swimmer, it was like totally manageable. But what happens when the waves get big is that you're forced to go further and further out. And it is that on a non-swimmer that starts to get the adrenaline rushing, because now you're further and further away. And what you realize is that when the waves get big, it's easy to go out. It's hard to come in. And especially when it's getting bigger. And that's when, the lifeguards, everybody was pulled off the beach. But my nephew, who was really little at the time, and my daughter, who was with him, older, was trapped outside. So I stayed with them. Actually, I got my son in and then went back out. And it got crazy quick. And the thing that, like you said, Jay, that was you're super comfortable in your surrounding. I've been in the ocean all my life. I'm familiar with surfing and all aspects in the ocean, right? But it's the compounding fatigue, and never have been in that before. And there were moments in there where it was like, when I went back to get that girl, I didn't know, like, I think about that. Like, I was really crushed. And each time, I spent 4 days in the hospital after this event from twisted intestines. That's how bad it was. And I think about that. Like, why did I go get her? And why was she still alive? Like, she was such a little kid. Yeah, crazy. Yeah, that was a moment. That was a moment.
Man, I don't remember that part of the story. I don't remember that you ended up in the hospital because of it.
I think I might have left that part out. But yeah, so it was just from all the turning.
Yeah.
It's what's weird is like it sent me to the hospital. Luckily, they didn't have to cut me open. They stuck the tubes in and they drained me, and finally it like untangled itself. But it's still, I've gone to the hospital 2 times since then for the same thing. Like, I'm now susceptible to twisted intestines. And so when I start getting stomach aches and my stomach bloats way up high, it's a real, I wouldn't change that day, but it was strange that things happen as reactionary against maybe even better judgment. Like, what made me go back and I don't even know. It's such a, but when I saw you, Jay, I was still like, it was fresh on my mind, and still like, because that girl, how did she survive? Like,
how old was she, Chris?
She was like 11, and these waves were so freaking massive. And the problem was, it was a sandy bottom, and the waves, when you would go under, there was no escape. You would get jackhammered and tumble and then make the surface. And she's been jackhammered in these waves she must have been there for 10, 15 minutes, just bam, bam, bam. And somehow she came up each time. Her dad thought she was dead. The lifeguards wouldn't go out and help people. It was that big. They refused to go in the water, and the dad was begging. And you couldn't see us because of the waves. So he thought that she was just gone. Luckily, my nephews, who are Olympic trial swimmers, they were on the beach and not intimidated, and they came out with fins. And that's how I was able to get in. And they then took them all the way around the point to bring them in.
Man.
So your nephews went in, and the lifeguards wouldn't go in.
Yeah, the lifeguards refused to go out.
Man.
Yeah,
isn't that a crazy?
On the beach, the sister of the girl out there is crying. And interestingly enough, later that night, they came up and found me, and the father. Yeah, it was really heartfelt. Like, it was awful. The whole thing was awful, really awful.
What did the father say to you?
He's straight out, I thank you for saving my daughter's life.
Wow.
Because the daughter, she was like right on the edge. But you know what and everything that you say then is reactionary. You're not trying to be manipulative. And when I got up to her, she said, "Don't let me die." And then she said, "I'm a good swimmer." And I remember thinking I could work with that. That she said something like, imagine the trauma that she was in, and that's her second thing. She says, "I'm a good swimmer." Like, that she's confident still. And I was personally, I was really shaken at this point. Crazy.
Have you stayed in contact in any way?
No, but she sent a letter. Somehow she, found me, and Jay, Heidi's read that to you before, right? Like, she read
the
that.
letter. I didn't even know she sent a letter, but
dude, the letter is so, that would make me tear up. I mean, it was.
I think the reason why we got on this subject is because Gabe and I were talking specifically about, we got a message from, one of the community of Train Hard, who said that they saw their son in a wave pool. And I'm sure you've seen wave pools before, and he had to run in and basically go save his son. And it just really brings up this idea of like trainings that we could protect in terms of like run, jump, climb, lift, swim, etc. And this is an extreme case. Your case is an extreme case, but I think where it's really powerful for me is acquiring skills, knowing your abilities and be able to make a difference. I mean, dude, and the fact that you're such a good person that like, you probably second guess this later on. Maybe I shouldn't have gone out there, but at the moment you probably didn't even think about it. Like, dude, there's someone out there. I have these skills and capabilities. I need to go step up. And then for her to be like, hey, I remember you told me that, like, hey, I'm a good swimmer. Don't let me like, man, that's so powerful. Like, could you imagine in that moment, because she had already been out there for like what, 15 minutes or so. I mean, so many lessons are happening in this moment right now.
It's so crazy. And that's what bubbled to the surface in her head, right? Like that word, like, it's like, that must've been what she was reinforcing as she was just getting the crap kicked out of her on every wave. Like, I'm a good swimmer. I could do it. Like, and that's how she survived. I mean, it's, yeah. Though I remember I remember getting my kids, because what happened was the water was coming into a cove and it was pushing more water, and a rip formed in the middle of the bay, and it was almost like a river, like with rapids taking you out. And I got them out into the dark, like the black water where there's no bottom, and it, they were fine. And I look at my daughter also, and early on she said, Dad, and I'm scared. And if your kid ever says I'm scared, there is such a radical dump in adrenaline, but then there's exhaustion that follows right after that. But it became real right then. Like when your child looks at you and is like, I need you. That was, dude, it was so bad on many levels. Like I mean, thank God everything worked out. But when I was way out there and I turned and I looked, because I couldn't get her at first. She was too far away from my nephew and my daughter, and I had to leave her. That was also a bummer. But when I got all the way out and I turned and I looked, and I'm like, I thought, my God, she's freaking alive. She's right there. And I mean, it wasn't that close to me. I had to swim all the way over there, but yeah, like that, it wasn't even a thought until I got up to her and I'm like, I'm tired, and she could pull me under. Yeah. Anyway, it was awful.
Man. Awful. And one of the things that immediately comes to mind too, Jay, is when I first heard this story, because I remember it, and I'm remembering more of it now from that podcast years ago. This is also such a crazy example of how different hearing these stories are now that I'm a father. So now that I have my own kids, and now that, like, because you just, I know it's cliche to say, but you don't understand like what you're saying of like your kid looking at you and saying, hey, I'm scared. Like if you're not a parent, like you can't understand that. But as soon as you have kids, it just, oh God, like you internalize all these stories to like, what if it were happening to me? And now there's like a face and a name to the little human that would say that to you. And it's a completely different emotion hearing it. So I appreciate you sharing it again and again.
Yeah.
A reason that we wanted to touch on this is hopefully no one listening to the podcast ever finds themselves in a situation anywhere near as dire as what you had to do. But hopefully if it does, you've done everything you could to be as prepared as you possibly can to act in some way, shape, or form, to get out of harm's way, to go in and grab someone, all the things. So, man.
Yeah. I mean, that was really key. Like the one thing I think about is that when things went bad, I had an arsenal of options. And so I was able to maneuver around where if you're not, like Jason, like you said early on, like if you don't have this level of experience, you may be operating under panic. I never operated under panic because I had so many options available to me. I never was afraid by being in that big of wave because I've been in waves that big. I've gone under, for a long amount of time. I've got an amazing breath hold, right? But it was only until the fatigue crept up where doubt came into my mind. And when the doubt was there, it stayed there. It never went away. It just got worse. And that's what was interesting about the experience was I luckily had a lot of options, but as soon as negative thought came in because of fatigue, it just propagated. And it wasn't containable. It just was wildfire.
You're probably so right about the girl though. Going back to her just for a moment, like the first thing she says to you is, "I'm a good swimmer." She must have been like mantraing that or somehow, right?
Why was it on her head? Right. I think the same thing. That was bubbled to the surface when she saw me. So it must have been fresh. And like whatever the family did, the preparation.
Yes.
Good for them that they have a child that had a level of fitness that was on an epic level that saved her. And imagine, that is one of the things nowadays, I do a lot of work in the military and in law enforcement, fire, and they're really struggling with this Gen Z. And, there's a level of fitness that is of historic lows, where these children are, their bones are porous, that they look like a sponge when you ultrasound them. And that's never been seen before, to have stress fractures and basic training in your femur. And these kids just are not prepared if something happens. And when something happens, it's an unknown. Are you tossed overboard and can you make it to shore? Like, are you prepared for some unknown? And like, Jay, I remember when we were down in Long Beach and we were with Leo Vera and Buchecha, and I'm like, when we went to the track that day and it was so beyond unsafe, I'm like, we got to go. And you looked at me and you're like, we're totally good. Like, and with the four of you, because I think we had like, between the four of the people there was like 20 world championship black belt titles.
Yeah, something like that, right? Yeah, I remember that day. That was a fun day.
But I was terrified, and you're like, "It's good," and I'm like, "So I'm gonna sit back while you guys take care of business then."
Wait. I need to know, what's the story there?
That's Jay's story.
No, Chris and I, I was trying to get Marcus Buchecha, who's like one of the greatest grapplers of all time. Mm-hmm. He then went on to fight, I believe it's UFC, but definitely MMA.
He's in Japan right now doing MMA. But yeah, 10-time heavyweight world champion.
And so I introduced him to Chris to help with his like kind of endurance. Yeah. And man, we go out to the track one day, and man, we were trying to get Buchecha to run, and it was a really eye-opening experience of how this man could be a world champion in what he's doing, but just have some deficiencies in other areas, in particular, just like muscle fatigue and just like body fatigue when going longer distances. I mean, we didn't run for very long, and
it wasn't a lap around the track even.
It was very eye-opening. And from that day forward, Gabe, I mean, really, we're talking many, many years. I've been just really focused on, there's a huge gap in strength conditioning and jiu-jitsu. And that was very eye-opening that particular day with Hinshaw, with Chris.
Yeah, we showed up at a track in Long Beach and it was so sketchy. It was so sketchy that it's like, you knew you shouldn't be there. Like you knew it. And I didn't want to get out of the car. I'm like, and Buchecha didn't even bring shoes. He didn't have a pair of running shoes. He came to the track in flips. So he's thinking about bailing, and I'm like, you're not leaving. There's no way any of you are leaving. The ratio's no way. And we went to the track, and I'm like, dudes, I'm not into this. Like, and
that's fantastic.
Yeah, they were like, you have no worry. It's all good. Everything's cool.
Oh, dude. Man. Well, over the years, Chris, obviously, you and I, we've worked together for years. You've worked with a ton of CrossFit Games athletes, now getting into the military, law enforcement. I am curious because you brought it up. And, we work with Customs and Border Protection. We work with different military and law enforcement groups as well. Actually, Gabe and I were just out in Texas at a military base. And, I guess a good question for you is, like, from an endurance perspective, what type of protocols are you doing for the military and law enforcement right now? What are you seeing as the test, and is the test appropriate, and how are you preparing them for it? Because the 1.5 mile run is still being used, but not as often anymore. Or what are you seeing in that regard? And we have a bunch of other questions for you, obviously.
Yeah, the fitness is still like military. It's relevant. It's always going to be relevant. It's not like what we experienced with the NYPD, where they're eliminating fitness requirements because enrollment is so low. Pass rates are at epic historic lows. And that's a problem for people like the NYPD, because when you go through the academy, the city of New York is investing roughly $35,000 in that candidate. They have to pass. And if they, get 15, 18% fallout because you can't run 1.5 miles in 12 and a half minutes, let's eliminate the test, because we are so low on officers in the field, and we don't want to jeopardize that $34,000, $35,000 investment that we're making. Well, military's in the same boat, but in the military, you have to have the annual physical tests. As a matter of fact, like with the U.S. Army, I've written a postpartum training program, getting women that have had a child and getting them fit for duty. And it's very difficult for a woman in the military within a year after having a child to pass their physical fitness test. So running is usually the thing that is what prevents people from passing. And so I spend a lot of time explaining the limitations and making it simple. The key is influencing the senior command, the officers, and making sure that they understand these concepts. Because if the officers are not on board, and if the officers can't recognize or teach it, then it's never going to be implemented. And so we've just been getting deeper and deeper traction. And as Jay knows, my whole the way my methodology works is I want to educate you, and I want it so that you understand the reasoning, the purpose of what you're doing, and the impact that it has. Like take breathing, for example. Breathing is something that's talked about heavily, and mainly because what I want is people to recognize the culture in law enforcement, military, and fire, and that is this machismo, I'm good, don't worry about me, I'm good. So even if I'm suffering, let's say in a ruck, and you look over and say, hey man, how you doing? I'm going to give you a thumbs up, I'm good. But what I'm teaching is the opposite. Why are you asking such a stupid question? You should, through observation, know that you're going too fast and you need to slow down based upon the rate in which they're breathing. Firefighters, if they're climbing stairwells and you're on air, listen to the rate of the breath as you're climbing and regulate your speed so that you're not putting in your partner into a compromised position when you reach the destination. So what I'm doing is yes, I'm teaching people the individual skill of breathing and how to monitor their breath to understand their fatigue, but also then for observation within the team. And then the third is, can you teach it? And so without senior command on board of understanding the significance of that, it's just going to be one by one. And I've gotten to the point where now senior command is on board in a lot of different branches of the service, which is amazing, because what I do should resonate within military, because I work primarily with CrossFit hybrid type athletes, and there is no different between that type of an athlete and a firefighter or someone in the military. It's the same exact training protocols. So yeah, it's for me really exciting that I've been able to segue into that type of space, and it's really resonating. I've got an opportunity this December to go visit the Royal Marines in the UK, and I cannot wait because they're the best ruckers in the world. I met a guy that weighed 80 kilos in Quantico a month ago from the Royal Marines. He weighs 80 kilos, and he is comfortable in carrying an 80 kilo pack, 1-for-1 body weight. I don't even know what an 80 kilo pack is.
I feel like they don't even make those.
I don't even know how high you're stacking it, but yeah, communications guy. And I'm like, dude, that is so gnarly.
Jeez. That's
they're so impressive. So it's a way for me to kind of learn as well, because as baby boomers get old, what they're doing, they recognize the value of like zone 2 training and cardiorespiratory adaptation. The problem is that they can no longer run. So how can you get your heart rate into a proper zone for cardiorespiratory adaptation and not run. And that is, let's walk, focus on cadence, and let's carry enough load so that your heart rate gets into that zone.
Yep.
And why not learn from the Royal Marines? So fortunate. I'm pumped about it. Can't wait. And I hope they put me through stuff.
I'm sure they will. But Gabe,
Yeah.
we're going to talk about zone 2. I mean, you had a question about zone 2, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I have a bunch of questions. I just feel like zone 2 is this thing that's getting talked about a lot now.
It's a buzzword for sure.
Yeah, but and at least all the reading, listening that I've done, I think that there's a lot of value to it. But I think like with anything, it almost gets bastardized to a point where like, what is it really? What's the actual use? Or is it just something that people are like throwing around, as just something else, the flavor of the week kind of thing that's going to make you fitter and help? So I think a good place to start though, just because you mentioned the rate of breathing, is rate of breathing a better way to kind of modulate your effort to be where you want to be for the length of duration that you're training? Is heart rate better, or do both of them go kind of hand in hand?
Yeah, heart rate and breathing, they kind of go hand in hand. But remember, you're trying to find the most easy way to perform an assessment. And so that's why these like talk test, like if you're able to continuously communicate, then you're at an easy effort. And well, the reason why it's called talk test is because your talking isn't interrupted by the need for oxygen. So talk test is the same thing as monitoring your breathing. You could also argue that zone 2 is nasal breathing. So if you can breathe in and out of your nose, then you're in zone 2. As soon as your demand for oxygen goes up, then you have to breathe through your mouth. So all of these tools are based upon your demand for oxygen. So why not learn the primary skill, and that is the rate in which you're breathing, the frequency, the cadence of your breath. And it's not like you need to think about it all the time. It's just a way for you to check, how am I doing in that particular moment? And if you have a teammate, or if you're a group lead, how is your group doing? And the breath is the tell. And you, like with athletes that I coach, you not only teach observation through audio, like listening. Like one of the things Becca Voigt, who is, arguably the greatest female, athlete to come through CrossFit, she came to me after she won the games when she had turned 40, and she said, I would love to have some breakfast with you. After she won the games in Madison a few years ago, I really want to talk to you. And so we meet up, and she said, during this particular event, which was rucking, and it was a 1,500 meter lap, you would carry a small amount of weight, and each lap, for a total of 4 laps, you would add more and more weight. And when she was on the final lap, she was about 500 meters in, and she remembers when I taught her about listening to the cadence of the breath of your opponent, the person you're trying to beat. And it was between her and somebody else. And she listened to the person behind her. It was between the two of them to win the CrossFit Games. And all of a sudden she remembered my teaching, and she listened, and she heard, basically a 2-count cadence where you're taking 2 steps per cycle of breath. And Becca looks at me at breakfast and she says, I've never felt so good, because I was still 1,000 meters from the finish line, and I knew I was going to win. I knew I was going to win that event, and I knew I was going to win the CrossFit Games because of that knowledge. And so Jay, you talk about it all the time. She heard that, she puts the surge, breaks the elastic, and just coasts in.
Dude, she broke the band on that. And that was one thing that you really helped me with, is this idea of not only listening to your competitors and understand that, but I look at it very similar to like the rower. When I'm rowing, I listen to the flywheel, and I want to hear it, and I want to optimize it. And I actually stole your breathing, and basically, your whole thing is like you step, step, right? And I stole it because Gabe and I took a group through a burpee test, which is like one of my favorite things to do. I do 15 burpees on the minute, every minute, for 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the group. And immediately after we were done, we went on a jog immediately. And one of the things I was trying to have them focus on is their breath and their cadence. And it's just exactly what you're talking about. And so I just really appreciate you opening my eyes to that. I mean, shoot, a decade, more than a decade ago, and just the impact that breath has on your heart rate and all these different things. So anyways, I just want to say thank you for that.
All right, we're taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about what we have coming up on the Train Hard app in the month of July. So we're halfway through the year, which means that all the programs on the Train Hard app are entering a new training phase for the months of July, August, and September. So if you've been waiting, if you've been thinking about joining the Train Hard app, now is a great time to do it because we're turning the page on the first half of the year and going into brand new focuses. Force is going to be focused on building some raw strength in the back squat, the deadlift, and the bench press. We're also going to be working on developing some strength in some body weight movements, the pull up, the dip. So just a lot of really great structured strength work, as well as the conditioning to make sure that you keep that engine going strong. So a lot of strength focus and force. So if you're trying to get strong this summer, absolutely something to check out. And then on the flex side, we have a brand new training phase as well. And that first 6-week cycle as part of that training phase is going to have a big focus on these giant sets. So 5 exercises per muscle group that you'll do in quick succession. So you'll do something like a bench press, then you'll do dumbbell bench press, then you'll go incline dumbbell bench press, then you'll do dips, and then you'll do push-ups back to back to back. The pump on these sessions is unreal. And I promise you, if you're trying to build muscle, if you've struggled to put on a little bit of weight, this is going to be the way to do it. This is going to be the way to improve your body composition. I'm super excited. And then the last thing is we now also have past cycles of Flex available as an ebook. So if you're just not trying to download another app, you don't want to be on a monthly subscription, you can now access Flex specifically by going on the Train Hard shop and purchasing the ebooks for either just a 6-week cycle or the full first training phase of the year. So highly recommend checking that out. Highly recommend getting on the Train Hard app. Let's get strong. Let's get big. Now let's go back to the podcast.
Well, you will love this story. So Heidi and I were in Quantico when we were in Subway. And there were, in the Marine Corps, they do rotations, and so every 2 years you're relocated and blah blah blah. So you're never in one position forever. And this guy sits down who's taking over one of the schools in Quantico. This colonel, and he sits down and he introduced himself through the guy that we were with, our primary point of contact in training command. And he said that, I really am a fan of what you are teaching. And I asked him, well, why is that? And he says, because, I'm in jiu-jitsu and it's a black belt. And he says, I know based upon the cadence of the breath and the way the breath sounds, because you're not going to have in jiu-jitsu rhythm of the breath because of restrictions and all of that, but it's the way in which it sounds. And he said, I know when I'm going to win. I know way before, and I guarantee my opponent knows because of that demand for oxygen. And he said, and he was able to take one and apply it to application. And this is where a great officer surfaces to the top, is they could take an idea, a methodology from some of their areas, such as jiu-jitsu, and now apply it into a universal method for all Marines. They should be doing this. There should be an awareness, a real-time awareness of your level of fatigue, because when you're making life and death decisions, are you aware whether or not you're alert, or whether or not you can't even calculate simple math equations because of fatigue? And the breath is the single best way to tell that. And it resonated. And I looked at him, I'm like, that's a smart person. That's what the military needs. People that recognize through their own experiences the value of some educational piece. And that's we see that happening more and more, because let's face it, the military is trying to get more for less. The quality of the individual coming in is less than it used to be. And so how are we going to create greatness? Because they need, at the end of the day, greatness. By the way, I did ask a major general So the United States Marine Corps, they have a 3-mile run, and the Navy, the FBI, most fire law, they do it 1.5 miles, and not the Marine Corps, they do 3 miles. And I like the 3-mile test because it tells you your sustainable pace. It doesn't tell you what your VO2 max is, your upside, your maximal potential. It tells you your sustainable pace, which is awesome, your ability now. But my question to the Major General was, you got a Marine for 4 years. What would be your ideal time for every Marine in 4 years for that 3 miles? And the reason why I asked it was, is this individual going to be reasonable, or are they so out of touch with what people are capable of doing? And without hesitation, he said 24 minutes. I don't care who you are. In 4 years, every single person should be able to run 3 miles in 24 minutes. He is reasonable. He's not the problem.
Yep. It's not that's right. And Gabe, on that note, one of the reasons why I want to talk to you, and I definitely want to talk about this, is Gabe, he's been running in the mornings, and he brought up this idea of Hyrox. And I know that you're doing a lot of work with Hyrox. And so Gabe starts talking about Hyrox and how he's such a great runner and all these different types of things. Right? And basically he's like, I'm going to do one in Dallas. And I was like, that's interesting. I was like, tell me more, Gabe. This is literally the way the conversation happened. I was like, tell me more about like what it is, blah, blah. And he goes, oh, well, it's, doing this. They actually have a partner one. I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. I was like, you know what? Let me ask Ashley, make sure I can get away. And then if so, like, I'm in. And so long story short, Gabe and I are doing a Hyrox in November. It's November, right, Gabe?
Yeah, November 23rd.
I'm so
And what is the Hyrox is it's going to be 8K of running, right, Gabe? Is that what it is?
I believe
I love that you don't even know what you signed up for.
Yeah. So it's 8K, and then there are stations between every 1,000-meter run. And if Chris, you would know, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's ski erg, sled push, sled pull, burpee broad jump. There's the 1,000-meter row at some point, lunges with a sandbag on your back, and then wall balls.
Yeah, you forgot the farmer's carry, then lunges, and then wall ball.
Farmer's carry. That's right. Yep.
And so, looking at it, you train, you're getting into the Hyrox space, or you are in the Hyrox space, and you've been in the CrossFit space, obviously, for many, many years. For a guy like me, or maybe anybody, like, what do you think is the difference between Hyrox and CrossFit in terms of developing the overall athlete? Like, what type of athlete do you think thrives in a CrossFit environment? What type of athlete do you think thrives in a Hyrox environment? And are they different?
Yeah, so there is a big difference, and it is the viewpoint of the workout itself. So if you ask the typical Hyrox athlete, or the athlete that is looking at going into Hyrox that doesn't have a CrossFit background, they're concerned about the obstacles, the 8 obstacles. They're concerned about the amount of stress that will create. How heavy is that sled to push and pull? The damage a burpee broad jump can do. Farmer's carry. Do I have the grip to carry? Or how about I have to do 100 wall balls as a male of 20 pounds? Like, they're concerned about that, where the CrossFit athlete looks at a 20-pound wall ball as a male and 14 as a female, and it's like super manageable. Matter of fact, they look at all the obstacles and it's like, wow, like those look easy. And so they see the run as the biggest challenge. So they're opposites of one another. And I do believe that a CrossFitter has the advantage in this situation, because they're not going to be disrupted. They're not going to be challenged, let's say, or put into negative space by the obstacles. It's going to be their sweet spot. It's going to be the point where they feel like they can recover. And that's a good position to be in, because now you can pinpoint your training like you guys. Let's face it, the obstacles are going to be a joke, especially as a team where you can trade off, where you're going to be riddled with challenges in that 8,000 meters of running.
And so on that note,
Jason, that means you can't slow us down.
Jay, are we allowed to talk about your 2 ideas that you floated past me? And I loved one of them.
Which one was my idea? What, holding a rope around Gabe's waist or what? No.
No. You said to me that you were like, I'm thinking I might want to go down to 200 pounds.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
I want to go down to my weight before I had a driver's license.
Yeah, that's true. No, you're right. I did say that.
Jason weighed 200 pounds as a 15-year-old.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, he's the guy in 8th grade that had the full beard, right? And chest hair.
You know, it is funny. I mean, it's funny, not funny. I was telling Gabe this. I have not seen under 200 on a scale since I was before a driver's license, and I don't know what that's like. But
man, that'd be awesome. I think that should be a part of our plan. 100%.
I don't know. Well, let's get past the. Well, we already made the commitment to do that, which I'm excited about. But I want to ask about.
For you. I'm so happy because Hyrox does an incredible job with their events. It is a world-class experience, and you're going to have a great time. And it's amazing the people that are so nervous going in, but it's first class. And what's really interesting to me is the retention rate. So you will do your first Hyrox and you're going to want to do another one. And
do you think it's because it's repeated events though, Chris? Like, do you think that CrossFit can learn from Hyrox in the sense that, like, when you're a spectator, because I watched some of the national championships on YouTube or whatever, do you think as a spectator, you could wrap your head around it? Like, here the three of us are talking about what the event is. I have a general idea. You know exactly. Gabe, he's kind of like 80%. But now that we know this, right, we're going to know it basically indefinitely. We know that it's going to be these 10 different things, to be this different things. Do you think CrossFit will need to get there to have the type of spectator buy-in to continue to grow the way it has?
Well, that's what's really interesting about the sport is that the broadcast, the media has trailed the events themselves. And meaning like it's hard to do live because they're sending out wave after wave. I mean, in Europe, they're having events with 14, 15,000 people. They're sending waves for 48 hours every 10 minutes. And so it becomes challenging to track, because it all begins to muddle together. Now, somehow, some way, the obstacles are never bottlenecks. The way in which it's spaced out, the way in which they have so many different stations that you're never going to have to wait. But the problem is tracking of the athletes, and they have gotten significantly better by bringing in media teams. So as the business has grown and they get more spendable money, they're trying to put the broadcast in because people want to see what the elites are doing. And the reason why is because imagine you're a amateur Hyrox athlete. Well, the way that you're going to improve your performance is, what do the pros do? Where do they find, like transitions? Do they start after an obstacle? Is there a period of time where they're ramping back up their speed? How do they do that? And media is going to be a big part of it. But right now, it's the only group that's easy to track is what they call like the top 15. These are the highest ranked people in the event, and they give them more of a gap so you could follow the group much easier. What's cool is, Jay, if I was there and I went down and watched you guys, you literally will run past me at least 15, 16 times. Oh, so man, as a family member, as a fan,
you can see them and get fired up.
And so what Hyrox is doing is they're aware that their events are now destination events where the husband, the wife, and the kid is going to be there. Well, if they're all there, we need to do something for the kid. So they're now coming and, playing around with this idea of a scaled version and doing age groups as a fun event, much, much scaled, but inside the same venue. It's very smart.
It's so smart. And it's so smart too, how they have the different categories. Like, you'll have marathons, whatever, big running races, but everyone starts at the same time. So because we're going to compete at one time in the day, and my wife signed up too, she's going to do it, but she'll do it later in the day. Yeah, so they also make it right. They make it so family friendly, like you said, like we'll compete and then we'll like have some time and then she'll compete and you can like enjoy it both as an athlete and a spectator. in the same day. Big reason I wanted to sign up was exactly you said. I've heard now from enough people that it's just so fun. Like it's so fun. It's not like it's a lot of people, but it doesn't like feel like a lot of people. Like you get the energy of there being a lot of people without like the headaches of it being.
Imagine every 10 minutes, there's another 20 athletes with just some epic stoke level, and they're just fired up, and it gets just infused every, 10 to 15 minutes.
Every 10 to 15 minutes.
For 2 days.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, so Gabe and I could go like at midnight?
No. We're going in the morning. I checked.
Yeah.
Wait, you already got our time?
Not our time, but they have like throughout the day the order that it's going to go and the pay.
Okay, I gotta start prepping for max optimization at 9:02 a.m. But Chris, what's so funny, man, is you bring me up, man. I obviously anybody that's listening to you and I on podcast before, we always reminisce on a lot of good times. But I still think one of my favorites was at the burn and run, or I think it was it was triple threes. Triple threes. I come off the double unders. I do 300 double unders. I come off the rower first. And I'm like in like whatever place. And I'm on like, I'm getting, I was in first, and I think I took 17th on the event overall. Yeah, and it was a 3 mile run. It was a 3 mile run. And I'm clipping like 6 minute miles or something. And I'm getting passed up by like 15 guys. And I'll never forget, it was like the last lap. And I'm running and I see you and you're like, Jay, you gave me some like, moment of inspiration. And I swear I tried. I got like 50 feet. I had this beautiful boost. And then all of a sudden it just
started walking.
Started walking. Anyways, good times, Chris. I am
the best of all was on that event. So, we had the iconic year in working with Miranda, you and Garrett and Neil. And that year that you're talking about was the year after. So we had been together for a long time. And in that event, Rich, because of the row and the double unders, was well in front of Neil Maddox. And I'm on the back stretch in Carson, because you had to do that mile-long loop 3 times. I'm on the back stretch, and this was before Rich walked, and I wasn't working with Froning at the time, and I'm listening to his breathing, and he's like a half a mile into the run, and it was so rapid, like a 2-count cadence. Like it was a matter of time before he had to walk, because he's 2.5 miles from the finish line. And so he's coming along, Rich is, and I'm going side by side, side shuffling with him, and Neil is like 50 meters back, and I'm Neil. I go, Froning's got to walk. You got him. And Rich looks over, and you got to realize that, Rich was the most iconic person, and it was a rivalry with Jay, and Jay was my guy. Like Rich was the Dark Lord, man, and I need to take him out. And so I don't care who he is. I'm like, he's going to walk. He's dying. And Rich looks over with an almost walking jog, and he looks over, and he's like, really, bro? And I'm like, oh, I'm not your bro. That's my bro. It was so cringing. I think about that now, and I'm like, that was really awful. But I didn't know Rich. Rich turned out to be the nicest guy in the world. And so it was like, imagine how that impacted him. And sure enough, he did walk.
Oh, yeah. God. And that was pretty iconic that he walked. And then
that is a phenomenal story.
Oh, man.
That is a phenomenal story. Oh, man, it's so... I love that. I love being equipped with that information to know that that's coming. Cause I can't imagine like more of a like feel good feeling of adrenaline to like, because you know what you know, like that's it. Like I got him. Yeah. I just got to do my part, and I got him, man.
Yep. Yeah. The band, just to man. Oh, you and I, we need to do an episode where it's just like top 10, stories with Chris Hinshaw. I got loads. But anyways, to Hyrox, just because I really am curious your opinion on this.
Yeah.
You see some stuff come out in the CrossFit space saying that, Hyrox is the next CrossFit, this and that. Do you really see Hyrox as a competitor of CrossFit? Do you think they mutually benefit each other? Or do you think that it is a legitimate threat? And if so, what do you think CrossFit should be doing to mitigate that? What are your thoughts there?
So, I come from a sales background, in Silicon Valley. I mean, that's 25 years. And
that's software sales, baby.
And so I find that CrossFit needs an infusion of new customers from different areas. And CrossFit's ego got in the way where they didn't attract the triathletes, because of their whole commitment with CrossFit endurance and, sprinting versus true endurance training. They then lost out on the Spartan athletes, Tough Mudder athletes, and they just keep passing on these potential infusions of new athletes, new customers to come into the affiliate. And now Hyrox comes rolling along, and there is some underlying tension. Like, I did an article with the New York Times, and and interviewed both sides, and both want to say that, oh no, we created this sport, and it's an independent group of people, and it's Hyrox based athletes, and this is our market. It has nothing to do with CrossFit, that type of behavior. And then there's CrossFit saying Hyrox is nothing more than CrossFit, and we invented this sport. And it's like, well, let's pump the brakes a little bit. I honestly believe that CrossFit should have a booth at every single Hyrox event, because they're so complementary with one another. And if I'm also CrossFit, I'm looking at the way in which they conduct these events. Are they safe, right? Is it good value for the consumer? And can I potentially benefit? Can my affiliates benefit? And the answer is this. If you have a member in a gym that wants to do Hyrox, they're going to enter that event, and it's going to be a few months away. So they're going to now be committed to coming into that gym. They're going to be a paying, responsible member, right? And they're committed, motivated. They're then going to do that Hyrox event, and it's going to be world class. Hyrox will do their part. So much so that when that athlete goes back to the gym on Monday morning, they're going to say to themselves, I'd like to do another one. And that athlete will be in the gym for a minimum of another 6 months. So because of Hyrox, you're going to get 9 months of easy retention. What an incredible thing. And so I feel like Hyrox just does what they need to do, and it's going to thrive. CrossFit's the one that can ride it and create value for the affiliates. And that's what should be done, in my opinion.
Man, I couldn't agree more. I think you hit and it goes back to something you said earlier, which is, if you're a CrossFit background athlete, you're not worried about these obstacles. Yeah. Like, it does prepare you so well. And then sure, you have to get your running in and getting comfortable with that, but you don't necessarily need a gym membership for that. You can do that on the side, but you do need coaching and a program and a gym to make sure that sled doesn't feel heavy, to make sure that the 100 wall balls at the end don't absolutely crush you, so on and so forth. So yeah, I think there's so much benefit to it.
Yeah.
And if I was 198 pounds, that run would be a little bit easier for me.
Bro, you feel like you're going downhill in a tailwind. I'm telling you.
If you're 198 for this race, I'm going to tuck behind you and draft off of you the whole run.
Dude, that's how I would run. Could you imagine me? I used to run with them. I was like 160. I'd be tucked behind Neil Maddox, Garrett Fisher, and Khalipa. It was like I was in a vortex, like behind, like, it's like a big freight train, and I'm just coasting in the back, pumping the brakes.
Oh.
Those were the days.
Those were the days.
All right. So Chris, I'm going to take advantage of the last 10 minutes here and get some free coaching. So how would you, Chris
didn't sign up for that.
How would you recommend that me and Jay approach this race with, like, me having a slight advantage on the run, and I'll probably be, the better runner there, but Jay obviously being absolutely world class at, like, being able to row, ski, move the sled, move that stuff. Like, because my understanding is we run together, but then you can split up the stations however you want. What's kind of like the tips that you would give us so that we can maybe get on the podium in Dallas?
Yeah. So you guys, the strategy is going to matter, like your transitions and what you have to be thinking about. So I'm going to help you a bunch on this with some good coaching ideas.
Oh, yes.
So the first thing is like what you just did on your assessment, that if you don't have equal runners, you're going to have one that's slower. Then unfortunately that runner is going to have to go at a harder effort than you will. And that's going to create a problem for when you get to the obstacles. So you need to be thinking about who is the person getting onto that obstacle first to do the initial piece. And then that person should do a higher ratio so that they actually slow down, and now the weaker runner can stay with you. So even though Jason's more capable on the obstacles, you're going to maybe have to do more of the work, especially coming into the obstacle, so Jason can recover, because he's going to be running at a much higher intensity than you will. So he's going to end up either resting when you approach that obstacle and you start it, and he may even do less of that obstacle because he needs time when you're coming off of that obstacle to recover so he can again run faster. So it's really important for you to be thinking of it. The key for Jason is going to be his run training. And the key in doing that is making sure you have a realistic running time that you think that you will do on race day. And then you build your training program around that. I don't think you guys have an issue with the obstacles. It's going to be the running is going to be the problem.
Got it.
Yeah. I mean, I have two questions on that. The first is this about a 60-minute effort? Is that right, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, for you guys, 60 minutes yeah.
On a 60-minute effort, would you recommend any type of like sugar supplement? Like does anybody take any supplementation during this time, or is it just like ready, set, go?
Yeah, I would just ready, set, go. I mean, yeah, it's an hour.
Yeah.
And you're going to have some rest time in there in the obstacles. So no, you're fine. I mean, and one of the things that is amazing about Hyrox is that if you take that hour, you can take 50% of that, and that is your average probably run time. So your run will take roughly, 30 minutes. Now you're doing team, and so I would add another 5+ minutes to that, but that gives you a good ballpark of what your run total time will take, and then you could use that to come up with your run training paces.
Got it. Man, back to the days of 8K, remembering my cross country days.
So this is the thing that you have to remember, though, is that it's not just an 8K. You're going to have over an hour of time on your feet. And so you've got to prepare the structure for being able to perform, because that last 8,000 meters, you're going to be somewhere 55 minutes into the event. Right. And,
yeah,
and so that's the same thing, Jay, like on 333.
Yeah. Time on your feet is going to be an impact. Now, the way it works is, are they like 400-meter loops, give or take, or 500 meters?
So it depends on the venue. There will always be there'll be multiple loops. It just depends on the size. So I was in Cologne, and it was a massive indoor space. I was in Chicago, and it was smaller, and I think you had to do 3 loops or 3.5 loops. So it just depends on the size. Hyrox, one of the things that they don't skimp on is the location. They are grabbing flagship locations. Like New York just happened, and rumored that they spent $1 million for that venue.
New York was the other thing that hooked me, because so I'm originally from New York, and like a bunch of my friends did it. The other thing they've done an amazing job of is, I know race, event photography has always been like a big, marketing tool for a lot of these races, but Hyrox does an incredible job of getting people like the coolest shots of them doing these races. And I saw all my friends do it, and they all posted about it. And I was like, all right, I got to do this. I got to see what all the buzz is about.
And the finish is epic. So they have like a gauntlet where the wall balls, you're going to come in from that final run, and now you have your wall balls. And they have it set up so that there is stadium seating, and you are in this, like, almost, it feels like a tunnel. And on one side is wall ball shots, the other side is wall ball shots. And then next to you is this giant bleacher setup. And when you finish your wall balls, you run in the opposite direction that you came in from the run. And there you climb steps, and you get up onto the main stage, and your name is announced on the main stage where they have the podium finishers. every single athlete experiences what it feels like to win. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, they set themselves a goal and they went out there and they did it, you know. And I think just accomplishing for Hyrox for a lot of people is great. Now, I know for me, I'm specifically going to add in running, which I'll talk to you more about. And I'm debating the drop in the weight thing, if it's going to help me on this run, because I like the idea of, I mean, cause I don't have to worry about I don't think I'm gonna have to worry about the sled push or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm still going to be probably one of the bigger guys out there, but I want to be able to get the run going. So yeah, man, I'm excited. This is the kind of stuff though that fires me up, Chris, because, you know, Gabe and I talk about all the time, having seasons. You know, my big why is like to be able to, you know, provide for my family, be able to do these different things, and always have the fitness to be able to do this. But throughout the year, if I could start creating these little like kind of things that I could train for, not only am I going to acquire new skills, but it's going to keep me fired up. Even like this kind of conversation, like, dude, I'm ready to go run right now. I already went on a bike ride this morning, but I'm ready to go run.
Nice. No, I think that you're going to have a great time. And, you know, one of the things that science has proven is that if people have a goal, their overall motivation dramatically shifts. I mean, one of the biggest difficulties people have in going back to the gym day after day is they don't have a specific goal in mind, and it eventually just weans off. And this is where every CrossFit athlete, it is a reasonable goal, because 50% of the event is going to feel easy to them. It's going to feel comfortable to them. It's not going to be where, you know, they don't know how to grab a sled and you know, do I grab it high on the rails? Do I grab it low on the rails? These things are just going to almost feel instinctual. And so by having this goal, it's going to change your mindset. And what's amazing is that anybody who hasn't done a Hyrox like you guys, the day after, you're going to be stoked, a level of pump that you haven't had in a long time. And I think that's the magic that Hyrox does, is that they test you, and it's a tough test, and you know it's a tough test, but the next day you're still thinking about what you did and you feel great about it. Anytime that you could have a competition and the day after you're still thinking about it in a positive way, that athlete is going to come back. And that's where this sport is with them right now. Everybody's talking about it because everybody is getting a taste of that first time experience, and they're coming back and saying, you got to do one.
Man, Chris, I also have to thank you, because I could see it in Jason while you were talking the whole time about like Jason being the slower runner of the two. It was bothering him to the point where he is so fired up to go run that I think that alone, I think, benefited our team greatly, because he does not want to be pulling us back. I love it.
Also, one more thing that Jay has a benefit on is power output. So I didn't realize the strength of this until we ran in the hills. So we were always running on the track, and it was always really boring for me, because it was always the same thing. I got to teach him about his breathing and stop all this movement of arms, and his pacing was challenged. But soon he developed where all of that became natural for him. And that's when he evolved into a true competitor, that he didn't have to think about the basics, right? Everything was dialed. So we started going off-road and into the hills, the Santa Cruz Mountains, and Jay smoked me. And it was shocking. How is he beating me so easily up these hills, where I had to say, you know, we don't need to get our heart rate this high going up, we should walk. And he's like, mine's good. And what was impressive is that his power output. And this is where a CrossFit athlete like Jason will have an advantage, because myself, if I push that sled or I do burpee broad jumps, because I don't have a high percentage of fast twitch fibers, I'm not going to be able to be as skilled in those. And imagine Jason, if he slows down some, it is going to be really easy for him to transfer into the movement of running, where athletes such as myself, it's going to take a little more time for that to occur. And that's another advantage that CrossFit athletes have shown in Hyrox, is their ability to get into their running pace occurs faster. One of the pieces that I have to teach the running athlete doing CrossFit is how to what's the cheat code? And the cheat code is this, that if you don't have the power, then you can't have a long stride length. So speed in running is based upon your length of stride plus your cadence, how many steps per minute that you're taking. And the mistake is that people don't have a strategy in leaving the obstacle. Like, I'm just going to run. But you got to have one so that the body transitions faster. And so what you want to think about is cadence. Have your normal running cadence. So let's just say you're taking 160 steps in a minute. Then what I want is a short step, and I want you to establish that cadence rate quickly. And that cadence rate is going to be familiar to your muscles and your brain, and it will relax, it will settle. And as soon as you start settling, the length will magically occur and transition. But most people don't think about it. They just think, oh, I'm going to settle into my pace. But that's not how it works. You've got to have a strategy, and it's really focus on cadence. And then as the body transitions and relaxes, you lengthen stride. But yeah, Jason will for sure have a very easy transition.
Oh, we'll see. We'll see. Before we let you go, I have to ask one last thing. And then we got to have you on the show again, which is the CrossFit Games are for the first time in Texas. Gabe is a local Texan now. And you work with several of the athletes, including the current men's champion. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, are there any hot takes? Sean Woodland just was announced as not doing commentating, which I was very surprised. He actually goes to our gym. Are there any hot takes on the CrossFit Games that the community should be aware of? Because I'm not as deep as maybe some people are, but I'm wondering, any hot take on the CrossFit Games? What's going to happen there? Who do you think is going to win? What's up?
Well, so I'll tell you like the undercurrents. There's lots of discussion about this being a venue where the indoor is going to house all of the events. And the reason why they sold out all these tickets is because there's not a festival going on in outdoor events where you can go out to a outdoor stadium and watch events, or you can go out to the bike course or out to the lake. There's not been announced those options. It's all indoors because of the heat, right? And weather risks of lightning. And so indoors, that's a trap. And, Dave has proven over and over again that if it's hot out and I'm not permitted, because let's face it, it's not the Wild West it used to be when Dave could program Murph in the middle of a 110-degree heat wave in LA and think that's a good test. That's not going to happen anymore. It's going to be much more ethical. So what he's going to do is, Navy SEAL style, I think that he's just going to circumvent it. And you know what? You're going to wake up at 2 a.m. and we're going to do it outdoors. They'll find a way. But I don't think that it is reasonable at all to assume everything's going to be indoors. So that's being discussed. Do I need to swim? Do I need to run? Certainly Trek's not involved, so I don't need to do a bike ride. I think all of that is traps. There's also discussion that it's going to flip, where normally Dave does the high volume endurance pieces in the beginning, and it will end like the Olympic Games does with a long event into the stadium, like the marathon is done, where it will be opposite of that. But as far as about Jeff and what he's up to. So I was just out in Montreal for a week with him, and the first one, and you're gonna like this, Jay. I gave him this workout, and it was just a workout. Here's your workout that we're gonna go do, and it was 500 meters in 1:45, a minute of rest. 500 meters in the same 1:45, but 2 minutes of rest. He did that one time through, so a total of 4 500s. He then rested after that fourth 500, 2 minutes. And then I said, you're going to run 1,609 meters, and target time is 4:55 to 4:57. And
so that's a mile.
Yeah, mile. And what's really interesting is when that is on a piece of paper, and to me, it was just a workout, but I wanted to see how he would respond, right? Like, does he respond the way I do, right? Like, he should be. And I've never tested Jeff in a mile ever. We've tested 5Ks. Matter of fact, Jay, you will love it. I mean, he just went 70 and change minutes for a 10-mile run, and he never got his heart rate above 156. He did a 5K, never got his heart rate above 156, and ran it in 1934. And so like lots of like volume, but at easier intensities. This was going to be a test, and he ran 456 in this workout, but that wasn't the thing that was interesting for me. It was, he didn't care. It was like, whatever. It was checking boxes. It was like, it didn't matter. It could be another 2 sets of 500s or a mile in 456. It was like, it didn't faze him at all. There was no drama. It was just like another workout. He laced up his shoes, did his warm-up drill, and just pulled the trigger. And that to me was impressive. That level of just absolute like methodical confidence.
Dialed in. I love that.
Yeah, like the same thing. I'm going to Vegas next week, and it's only 2 athletes I work with, Alex Kazan, and last time I was in Las Vegas, I told her, I said, we're going to do a 2K row, and she said, "What's the target?" By the way, no one knows this, but she doesn't care if I tell someone. I said 707. That's what you've been training for the whole time. And she's all, "No, I've been training at like 380 watts. I'm like, "Yeah, no, or 280 watts." And I'm like, that's what that was. It was all watts, but it's going to equate to a sub 707. Anyway, Alex Kazan just did 2,000 meters in 706.
That's so fast.
Dude, that's why it's like, you look at what these athletes do, and it's not like they're peaking. It's not like they're tapering and sharpening and focusing. It's, what are we doing? Oh. And that to me shows where this sport is with this generation. It's in its infancy. That you're going to get females that are going to be rowing sub 7, and athletes like Jeff that could put, that afternoon, put 365 over his head, and it's shocking where it was and where it is. Like the fact that Jeff's zone 2 is a 6:45 mile pace. That's remarkably faster than anything I've ever seen.
Huh. Dude, I love it, Chris. And I know you're working with your 2 athletes, but the fact that they've been able to accomplish so much, it is going to be exciting to watch CrossFit Games this year. We're going to be out there, Gabe and I, we're going to be doing an activation with the crew over at GoRuck.
Sweet.
We're going to be putting on some, it's going to be more of like a jiu-jitsu. And then I'm also going to be hosting men's club workouts in the morning, because I've been doing weekly men's club workouts here in the Bay Area. If you want to come join us, you're welcome to. But we've been talking about that on the podcast. So make sure if you are at the CrossFit Games, come see us, hit us up. Chris, we need to have you back on the show. I want to be sensitive of your time, but if people want more information about Chris Hinshaw and what you're currently doing with your online programs, just with whatnot, where's the best place to go?
My recommendation, I would go to aerobiccapacity.com. You could find the same thing on Instagram and it will take you there, but everything's on that site. The Hyrox aerobic capacity courses, we're going to start loading those in now that they're about to release their level 1. Hyrox is releasing a level 1 to kind of create unity among the coaching staff, which is really a smart thing. And I was fortunate enough to be tapped to do the Hyrox engine module. It's a practical application of metabolic pathways and muscle fibers and different training intensities. But yeah, that's launching, and so mine will be on soon. And the plan is, the Sundays after events, or one of the days at the venue. But aerobiccapacity.com.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Awesome.
Well, Chris, really appreciate you. Gabe, appreciate you. Everyone listening, we appreciate you guys for taking the time, to just dive in. Chris has a wealth of knowledge that he's already shared with us, and we have incredible stories. Like, not only do we have we shared a few today. I didn't know that. I had never heard the Rich Ferroni one, so I appreciated that. We got to have Chris back on the show to talk more about it. A final ask for our listeners. It really helps out the podcast. We have great guests like Chris and others. Go back, check out the other episodes. But most importantly, if you got value from this episode, share with a friend. let someone else know about the podcast. It helps us out, helps Chris out, helps the podcast out, helps everybody out, including your friend. And last importantly, keep training hard. See you guys next week.